The difference between negative psychotherapy and its positive counterpart is that negative psychotherapy isn't about what you do, it's about what you don't do. Whereas positive therapy is very much about what you do. And in the paradigm of positive psychotherapy, what you don't do is seen as the cause of our difficulties. In other words, we should get up off our asses and do stuff, because not doing is not taking responsibility, and not doing takes us into a bad place. So these two approaches are as far apart as any two approaches ever could be, which is important to know so that we don't imagine that we can nip from one to the other, taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that and adding it to our nest in an eclectic fashion. If we try and do that with negative and positive psychotherapy, we'll end up with a real mess, a confusing mess that won't help us, or it'll just confuse us more. Of course, it sounds kind of stupid to say negative therapy is all about what you don't do, and that is the not doing that is the helpful thing. Of course, that sounds strange to us, but it isn't so strange when we explain it a little bit. So what we're essentially saying is that what we do all the time when we would be better off mental health wise not doing it is grasping for ontological security, which comes down to the same thing as validating the self construct or ego construct. That's what we do in life. We do all the things that help to validate the self construct. We do all the things that help to bring us the perception of increased psychological security. And what that's really doing is kind of narrowing us down the whole time. We've been narrowed down and narrowed down until it's as if we're walking or moving or crawling through a very narrow aperture. And that's what life has become for us. And that's always the way when we are existing automatically according to the dictates of the self-concept. We're always going to narrow down and narrow down. And that narrowing down gets painful, of course, like wearing a shoe that's several sizes too small and then going for a 20-kilometer hike. That's going to be painful. When our life turns into a tunnel with barely any space to turn around, but just to crawl forward, that's painful. It's not much fun. And then when we get to that stage, we might think, well, what do I do to open it up? What steps can I take to open things up? Because we want to take responsibility and do something about it. But the glitch there is that everything we do narrows the tunnel down even further, shuts things down even further. All doing, without exception, all of our doing narrows our life down. That doesn't mean we should never do anything. It just means that our lives, when they are ongoing exercises of purposeful doing and nothing else, will bring us an awful lot of suffering, because we're narrowing things down the whole time to the point where we can barely breathe, to the point where it feels like we've got a steel band around our chest. We can't even take a proper breath anymore. Doing means doing that comes from having a particular view of the world, having a rational outlook, having an idea about what things are, and then our doing comes out of that. It's guided doing. We're doing in accordance with our goals. So that's what I mean when I say doing. I don't mean all activity. So I don't mean that any activity we engage in will narrow our lives down, because then we'd just be frozen in a kind of paralyzed state, afraid to exhibit any activities, and that would be pretty narrow in itself. So I don't mean that. I'm talking about doing as an extension of our will, as an extension of our way of looking at things. Because anything we do in that purposeful, rational sense simply perpetuates all of our assumptions about life, which is the same thing as saying it perpetuates our illusions about life. Because all of our purposeful doing is based on assumptions, or as we could also say, based on our illusions. So whatever we do, the doing might seem varied. It might seem that, oh, I'll do this. Oh, no, I'll do the other. Or I'll have this goal. I'll have that goal. And it looks like it all depends on what goal we choose. But it doesn't, because all goals are the same. All goals equal the thinking mind. All goals bring with them a freight of unexamined assumptions that acts so as to hem us in more and more and more. So having seen that, we come to a position where we could say, okay, yes, maybe not doing isn't such a bad idea. And in the neurotic mental health conditions, it can be readily seen that it's our doing, i.e. our attempts to safeguard ourselves or obtain security, that are causing us pain. Anxiety is the attempt to solve ontological problems, to eliminate risk, to obtain security. And that activity, the activity of being anxious physically, but more importantly, being anxious mentally, is a source of pain. It's acutely painful. The same as with OCD, the same with addiction, the same as anorexia. All these things where we do something, it's all about the doing, that has become counterproductive, overtly pain causing. Which doesn't mean that you can just walk up to someone who's suffering from anxiety and say, don't do it. Or someone who's got OCD rituals and say, hey, don't do that shit, yeah, don't do it. It doesn't mean we can say that, because what happens then is we deliberately try to not be anxious, or we deliberately try to not think anxious thoughts. And the deliberate attempt to not be anxious is anxiety, and it's not doing, it's simply anxiety ramped up another level. And in the same way, if I've got OCD rituals and I deliberately try to not do them, that isn't a not doing, that's just all the OCD energy, the obsessive energy, is going to go into saying, no, I mustn't do this. So it's the obsessive energy that's being used to combat the obsessive energy, and that doesn't work because the obsessive energy feeds into the obsessive energy to make it 10 times more obsessive, 10 times more strong than it was before. And even in the more modern types of therapy, such as acceptance and commitment therapy, we can see that they're bringing in acceptance, they're bringing in not being judgmental, they're bringing in compassion. But still there is this idea that we can do them. We know compassion is a good thing to do. I'm almost tempted to say that compassion is a great tool. I don't want to say that because it's just such a horrible thing to say. To use compassion as a tool. But we know that it's helpful. We can look at the scientific research, so we know it's helpful. And then we say, I'm going to be compassionate then. Okay, yes, I'll do that. That's a great idea. But we can't do compassion. It's not something that comes out of our thought, out of the thinking mind. Nothing compassionate comes out of the thinking mind, because the thinking mind can never go beyond itself or acknowledge anything that is beyond itself, so it can't be compassionate. It can go through the motions of being kind or caring, but it can't actually mean it. Because the thinking mind is only a mechanism. It's only a kind of a little robot thing. It's not there to be compassionate. We don't need it to be compassionate. And we can't use it to be compassionate. That comes from the heart of us, not from this device or this microchip, the microchip of the rational calculator mind. That's there for a reason. It does stuff, but it's not there to be compassionate. It's not there to use for every single eventuality, so we can't use it to be compassionate, and we can't use it to accept. Because if I say, I have to accept because that'll help, then that's the fascistic or tyrant-like thinking mind making orders as usual. And what's so accepting about the tyrannical rational mind issuing orders? There's nothing particularly accepting about that. And the thinking mind can't accept anything. It's incapable of acceptance for the same reason that it's incapable of compassion. It can only say yes or no in accordance with its own criteria for saying yes or no. And acceptance means it doesn't matter if I don't like it, or it doesn't matter if I find it very hard. I'm not going to label it as being a bad thing. So that's closer to acceptance. But the thinking mind can't do that, because all it can ever do is label. It is a system of labels, latent labels that can be enacted in judgments. Now, the reason I'm harping on so much on this point is that what happens is that we all get very, very identified with the thinking mind, so that we think it's it. We think it is us. I think it is me. I am my mind. I am myself, the self that the mind creates. And this process of becoming nothing more than the thinking mind, with a little tiny bit of other stuff there, maybe in secondary positions, such as intuition, maybe a bit of creativity, maybe a bit of kindness and spontaneity. That's all there, and the kingpin is thought. And that's how we all are. That's the default way which we are. So to start talking about being compassionate when we are pretty much wholly eaten up by the thinking mind, and that is our center of gravity, is kind of pointless. It's just not going to work. We have to go a lot deeper than that. And trying to be compassionate is not a not doing, it's a doing. The not doing would be to observe our non-compassionate nature without labeling that non-compassionate nature as being wrong or bad, and without trying to change it. So that's what not doing comes down to. So it can be seen that the difference between the two approaches is pretty much insurmountable, really. It's too much of a of a thing to get our heads around if we're positively orientated, to understand what it means to be negatively orientated. It's a step too far, it seems. And for that reason, it's not something that we can go around promoting left, right, and centre, promoting negative therapy as a cure for all ills, and hey, why don't you try this? Because that just wouldn't work. That would be a rather positive, aggressive kind of stance to take. Negative therapy only works when the ground is fertile, when the time is ready, when we're ready to see things that way cannot be transplanted on us. So just to say one more thing about this way of talking about negative therapy, we can tie it into what we were saying, what I was saying. I can tie it into what I was saying about the predator. Now, the thing about outwitting the predator, the key point, is that it's kind of difficult. It's not, if ever there was something difficult, this is it, outwitting the predator. So, what I was saying in the last installment was that the way to outwit the predator and not be caught out by him is to not think about anything and have an idea about things and act in accordance with that idea. So really what it comes down to is we become free from the predator by getting better at being and not putting all our money on doing, because doing belongs to the province of the predator. So as soon as we go down that road, we've handed ourselves over to him. There's no type of doing that we can do that isn't the predator. The predator is the doing. So this ties in with the definition of negative therapy that I just said, which is that negative therapy is what we don't do. So we have to learn not to do. It's a bit like a situation where we are already free, but anything we try to do to secure our freedom or to win our freedom automatically costs us our freedom, loses us our freedom. So that's a very tricky situation to be in. And it's a tricky situation to be in because our purposeful doing is pretty much, as I said, all of us, because we've kind of focused so much on that, and society focuses so much on the purposeful side of things and the doing side of things, that the being side is very neglected and we're not really sure about it. It's like part of our body that we don't know where it is and we can't really feel it, but it is there somewhere. So because our capacity to be is secondary to our capacity to do or to act in accordance with the thinking mind, i.e. to be a slave of the thinking mind, essentially, it's not just going to happen that getting the information about not doing is going to somehow lead to us not doing, because we are doing. The rational mind is a doing. It can't not do, and we are identified with this rational mind. So we're in a quandary there, we're in a bind. So negative therapy doesn't mean not doing. After all, not in this crude sense. What it does mean is living our lives as our lives actually unfold without trying to change anything. Only it doesn't mean that, because we will automatically trying to change something. But then again, if I'm living my life as it unfolds for me, a part of that life is me automatically trying to change that life in a direction that I think is better. Then living my life as it naturally unfolds also equals straining the whole time to stay in control and change myself. So there's no need for me to reject this part of me, which is always trying to know what's going on and control things in accordance with my knowledge, because that is the life that is unfolding for me. So in that case, what I do is that I notice this, and I be aware of myself trying to change myself or thinking that I should be different the whole time, out of a kind of a curiosity, really. It is essentially curiosity, because I'm not trying to get anything out of this observation. If I was trying to get something out of the observation, I am going to observe my security-seeking behavior and activity, because that's therapeutic, because that will free me from my pain. Then the predator has won that particular round, because wherever there's a goal, as I was saying previously, or an idea that I'm orientating myself around, then that idea or goal is actually controlling me. And that idea or goal is a construct of thought. So a construct of thought is controlling me. And thought is not giving us a true picture of reality. It's not giving us a true picture of reality because it's populating reality with abstract, concrete, literal entities that I am navigating to either obtain or avoid. So really I'm being controlled by these abstract, concrete, literal entities. They're controlling me because my activities have to make sense in relation to them. So they're controlling me, and yet at the same time they do not exist. So I'm being controlled by, totally controlled, totally determined by these things that don't exist. I'm a slave, for sure. But the weird thing is that what I'm enslaved to doesn't exist. So we could say that about the predator, that the predator enslaves us within his own prison type world, but that he doesn't exist. But then we can't say that the predator doesn't exist either, because that's a literal statement of fact. If I say it exists, that's a literal statement of fact. If I say he doesn't exist, that's a literal statement of fact. So here we are going astray. Here I am going astray, thinking this or thinking that. So when we're in this modality of being curious about the life that we actually are living and our life as it actually unfolds, this doesn't involve thinking about it, because thinking about it isn't curiosity. Thinking about it is always trying to control it. So if we're always thinking about it, we're totally incurious about it. We just want to make everything accord with our ideas, which means that we're a mechanical slave of the mechanical mind, or a slave of the mechanical mind. We have no time for curiosity. But if we are being curious, that's the same thing as saying that we're not thinking about everything. There is actually this genuine, interested observation going on. Okay, thanks for watching.